What's up, Campus Live fans? It's Lane here in the Campus Live studios today to bring you another edition of the Guns
Blazin!
podcast, episode number 28. As always, I'm one of your hosts today, and alongside me for today's episode is Mr. Miller Quinn. Miller, how are you doing today on this beautiful Friday here in Lubbock?
I'm doing good. Some big sports news came out today that we'll talk about later, so I'm excited to talk about and dive into it.
Absolutely. It's been already a crazy day, to say the very least. LeBron James going to the Philadelphia 76ers. We'll talk about that later, but before all that, we're going to discuss some Texas Tech college football season predictions, some Texas Tech basketball scheduling news, portal talk, and of course, like I just said, we will discuss all things LeBron later on in the show. But first, I just wanted to thank every single one of y'all for tuning in every week to our episodes. And we just ask that you make sure to like all of our videos, follow, subscribe wherever you're seeing any of our content on our social media platforms at either Campus Live, TTU, or the Guns Blazin podcast, as well as thanking our sponsors with first Roof Master of Lubbock. Fans, with all the rain and storms we've had over the past couple months in the Lubbock area, make sure to check out Roof Masters of Lubbock if you have any type of roof damages. And also, we would like to thank our sponsors with JSI Industries, our new sponsors with Lone Star Golf Cars, and the Exceptional Community Hospital here in Lubbock. First off, of course, we're going to talk about some Texas Tech football. We are getting very close to practice starting, just about 2 weeks away. Miller, we had a great live show on Wednesday.
Yep.
We talked all things Texas Tech football, but we're going to do a lot of that today as well, kind of maybe covering some of the same topics we had discussed on Wednesday, some new predictions and topics as well. But first, really, we can talk about this offseason, and we've talked about, the transfer portal previously in other episodes on this show, but kind of just a recap of this whole thing. Obviously, we all know about the Brennan Sorsby deal. We don't have to really rehash it at all. But you bring in one of the best transfer portal classes in the country, with it being fourth best according to On3's recruiting rankings. And you are missing a huge piece in that with Sorsby not being there, but you still have amazing guys in this class that are going to contribute at a very high level, especially even on the offensive side. You add in a Jordan Church on the offense line, one of the best run blockers in the whole entire country. Jet Carpenter to your tight end room. You might have maybe the best tight end room in the whole entire country as well, having Terrence Carter, Jet Carpenter, and Moose Ludwig in that room. And you heard at Big 12 Media Days, even head coach Joey McGuire say he feels like that they actually do have the best tight end room in the whole entire country. So it's great to hear that. And then obviously the biggest thing on the whole entire, roster movement for this offense was the wide receiver room. They completely rehaul that room. You retain Micah Hudson and Coy Eakin, but you add in Kenny Johnson, Jalen Jones, Malcolm Simmons, and Dante Lee Jr. Miller, from all of those additions on the offensive side, give me a couple that you're most excited to see play out this fall.
That I've been on him super high since we got him in the portal. Kenny Johnson is probably my favorite addition to this offense for this offseason transfer portal. And he is one of those utility guys that really will bring a big spark to the offense. He had over 2,664 all-purpose yards in his first 3 seasons at Pittsburgh. That led the ACC wide receivers during that time. And so bringing his ability, his speed to this offense is really just going to elevate it to the next step.
Yeah, Kenny Johnson is going to be a great addition, not just to this offense, but like Miller stated, all-purpose-wise. Coach McGuire and this staff have already talked about how great of a returner he is. He could easily be one of the best returners in all of the Big 12 this season. Should be great to see what he adds in that department. And then on the defensive side, you add, of course, Adam Trick, Austin Romaine, Trey White, Mateen Ibaragba. You go down the list of all of the defensive guys you added. But you also retain a bunch of guys in that room with guys like Bryce Pollock, Ben Roberts, A.J. Holmes, and John Curry. I'll talk about him later in a prediction that I actually have for this team. But on the defensive side, I think I'm most excited to see the addition probably of Austin Romaine. he is such a great player, such a great linebacker. And you saw it firsthand, actually, when Texas Tech played Kansas State last year. He made that incredible one-handed interception with a broken other hand. Just stuck his arm out there, made a great play. Was a beast in that game for Kansas State and has been for them over the past couple years or so. But adding him in for Jacob Rodriguez, obviously not an easy task. You're filling in for maybe the most beloved defensive Red Raider in the history of this program. But Austin, I think, is about as best as you can get when you fill in a piece like that for Jacob Rodriguez. And he might even be a better pass rusher than Jacob in this defense. I think you might even see some different sets where Austin is actually going to be maybe coming off the edge maybe for a play, or you see him rush up the middle, obviously, from that linebacker position. But besides Austin, who are some guys that we've added that you're really excited to see on this defense, Miller?
My personal favorite would be Trey White, coming from San Diego State. I think that just really bolsters your defensive line. We had a great defensive line last year with David Bailey, AJ Holmes, we kept. So just another guy that it is going to be hard to fill in his shoes. But when I look at who we could have gotten, Trey White was probably the best fit for that.
Yeah, and bringing in a guy like Trey White, who, just a couple years ago, this past season, he played all year, but kind of had been dealing with some injuries and stuff. So not as highly productive as you saw 2 years ago when he had over 10 sacks. I think it was around 12 and a half sacks he had for San Diego State. He is an elite pass rusher. You're going to see that. And then on the other side, you have another elite pass rusher in Adam Trick, who I think you might even see as good as David Bailey and Romello Highware. You can't get better than that for edge rushing wise. But I think you might see them be better in the run game. They play it a different way than David and Romello do. Romello and David are more true pass rushers. Obviously they were great against the run last year. I'm not saying they weren't, but I think you might see Adam and Trey become a really, really solid, maybe the best in the country at that edge spot and protecting a run. And that's not even discussing adding in 5-star LaDamian Guyton to that room as well. This is going to be such a talented edge room. And what's kind of some of your thoughts on LaDamian Guyton coming into this edge room as well?
I think this is going to be really good for him. This is, like you said, has a chance to be one of the best edge rooms in all of college football. I think for most of our freshmen, as you mentioned, with Joey McGuire talking about how they've developed, I think a lot of that comes from the seniority and the veterans that we have in the locker room.
Yeah, and that's not even talking about on the offensive side, Felix Ojo, who came here in January as an early enrollee, played through spring ball, and now you're already seeing him projected to be the second left tackle. It's pretty crazy as a true freshman to already be that high on the depth chart, especially, in years past covering Texas Tech, you might not see very much depth at all on the offensive line. And now, the second tier group might even be close to top 6 or 5 in this conference. That's how good they are with guys like Felix, Cash Cleveland, Deanthus Upshaw. You just go down the list, but should be a very talented offensive line that Felix is going to, like you said, get to learn from a senior like Howard Sampson, Jacob Ponton on the other side, just a real veteran group on that offensive line. But some other kind of sneaky adds that this team made, I'll go ahead and start with one at safety with Jordan Rogers, the D2 All-American that came in. You missed on some guys in the portal like Coy Parrish, ends up going to Oregon, was the top safety in the whole entire transfer portal class. But adding in a guy like Jordan Rogers, he's very seasoned, was highly, highly productive at the D2 level. And, opposite of Brennan Jordan, I think Peyton Morgan's going to be a phenomenal player. He's going to start at that opposite spot. But, Malik Esquera and Oliver Miles, they are young guys, and Peyton's a young guy as well. Adding in a senior piece like that, I think, is going to be huge for this safety room. But another sneaky add, we talked about it on Wednesday on the offensive side, Miller. What is that sneaky add that you see for this offense?
For me, I would say it is going to be Kirk Francis. With the whole Brennan Sorsby offseason drama, you're coming into the season Will is going to be quarterback one for us. And if something happens, he is coming back from that ACL injury, so hopefully he can come back, stay fully healthy. But I think bringing in a guy like Kirk Francis, especially for like the first couple matches against like weaker opponents in Abilene Christian and Oregon State, I feel like we could roll Kirk out there. Maybe get Will some reps in the first half, bring Kirk out there, and you'll still be fine. You'll still be probably winning those games by 30, 40 points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for a guy, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, Mitch Griffiths last year. Will goes down, and Mitch, he actually had to play here in spurts, especially against Oklahoma State. He finished out that game and looked great in that game when Will went down with the injury and Barron was still dealing with his injury. Having, that extra quarterback that you got out of the portal with Kirk Francis, you would have only had Brendan and Will, and then, a bunch of younger guys, really young guys, Chubb Jones and Stephen Cannon and Holden Phillips behind him. But having an older guy like Kirk Francis, where, God forbid, if Will, hopefully not a season-ending injury, but if he had got nicked up here or there, you could have a veteran guy that's played at the Division I level to come give you some real reps. But as we kind of move on from, talking the team, practice obviously starting here soon, we're really excited for that. We do have a few prediction questions, and, I think these could end up being, something we could do every single week on this show, just kind of giving these quick predictions as we get closer and closer to the season. And also, make sure to stay tuned on our Countdown to Kickoff series as well at Embassy Suites, as we really give you a deep dive into this whole entire team every single Wednesday at Embassy Suites. But for this show on the prediction side of things, my first question I have for you, Miller, is if you think Will Hammond finishes as a top 3 quarterback in the Big 12 statistically, because this is a very strong quarterback conference.
I think he can.
Yeah.
I think he definitely has the ability, not only in the air but on the ground with his legs. I think he can finish as a top 3 quarterback in this conference. A lot of people forget that coming into college, he was a 4-star recruit with offers from Houston, Oklahoma State, Tennessee. He ended up obviously choosing Texas Tech, and got to learn under Bear Morton last year. Unfortunately, didn't finish out the year the way he wanted to with that ACL injury. But I think if he gets in the groove and with the offense we have around him, that supporting cast, I think he could easily finish in top 3.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think he will finish in that top 3 statistically, just because of the guys he has around him on the offensive line, the running back trio. That might be the best in the country as well. We didn't even really touch on them too much. We'll talk about them a lot this year. So, just kind of hitting some of the new additions. And in that room, you do get a guy basically as a new addition with Quentin Joyner coming back. But the new wide receivers, you get Terrence Carter back, add Jed Carpenter and Musa Ludwig to that tight end room. I think Will has all the weapons to be a top 3 quarterback in this league. And I see him up there with Noah Fafita and Drew Mestemaker as I think they are the 3 best quarterbacks at the end of the season in this league. I think you could easily, pick guys out like a Devin Dampier or Bear Brockmeyer. But in my opinion, I think it's going to be those 3 guys in the top 3 of this league. And should be, this offense should be, in my opinion, with Will, when he is completely fully healthy, one of the top 15 to 20 offenses in the country. So absolutely, I think Will Hammond finishes in that top 3, Miller. But as we move on to our next prediction, we were kind of talking about it earlier, this edge room, who could potentially be the leader of this group. Who is going to lead Texas Tech in sacks this year, Miller?
If I had to go with the one guy, he had 4.5 last season. It is going to be A.J. Holmes, I think.
Wow, in sacks?
I think he's just going to potentially.
Yeah.
Or like we talked about, even Trey White,
Yeah.
Coming back. The previous season at San Diego State, yeah, like you said, he had 10 sacks. He was just a dominant guy, a good ad from the portal. So those would probably be the 2.
Yeah, A.J. Holmes, All-American. He's going to be a phenomenal player on this defense. I think that's That'd be, you'd win some money if you hit on the sacks for AJ Holmes right there, just being that in that defensive tackle spot. For me, I'm gonna go. You just talked about him, Trey White. I think he will lead this defense with sacks. I think you could see him hit that double-digit mark. Him and Adam Trick, probably both being around that same area. Romello Hyde and David Bailey both did that last season, and I think you're going to see probably the same thing this year with Trey White and Adam Trick. And I also think, like we talked about earlier, you're going to have guys mixing into that spot. Like you said, AJ Holmes, you could easily see him get, you might think double digit wise, that'd be phenomenal for this defense. I think could easily see him, hit that 4 to 5 sack spot range as the interior defensive tackle. Austin Romaine, coming in from the linebacker spot. Damian Guyton getting reps as a freshman. Jamon Mathis as well. Just you can keep throwing in guys that are going to contribute. But on this team, who do you think is going to be the biggest breakout star on the national scene this year, Miller?
I think it's going to be Micah Hudson. I think it's his time to shine. You got to see him in the spring. He said he's looking really good. We talked about it on the live show, how deep our wide receiver room is and how much rotation we can bring in. And so I feel like this is his opportunity to take that next step and be a leader of such a deep group.
Yeah, I completely agree. Micah Hudson, I think, is going to be the player on this offense that completely, breaks out this year and adds another element to this team. Like you said, during the spring, Micah looked tremendous. He looks like a completely new player. I think on the offensive side, that's a great pick. On the defensive side, though, for the biggest breakout player on this whole team, I'm going to go with John Curry. At that star position, he is such a versatile player. You saw him line up in the slot, guarding slot, receivers. You saw him even roll up top and act almost like a safety in different scenarios on this team. And he can also plug in and play linebacker for you whenever you need him to. He is going to be, in my opinion, the biggest breakout star on this team. And it would not shock me at all if you saw him, climb up those draft board lists. Hopefully, we do get him back for another season here in Lubbock. But I could definitely see John climbing up those draft boards as we head throughout the season, Miller.
No, I think that's a great pick. Like we talked about, we have one of the best linebacking rooms in the Big 12, and so for him just to continue to go into that room and compete day in and day out, really to sharpen his game, I think that's a great pick.
Yeah, and as we kind of continue discussing this team, we're going to get into our Lone Star Golf Cars Drive of the Game segment. Fans, Lone Star Golf Cars is offering free lifetime key and battery warranty plus $250 off with the purchase of a new golf cart, and that offer is good through this Sunday, July 26th. So with just a couple days remaining, make sure you go and check out LoneStarGolfCars.com or their store at 8507 Urbana Avenue here in Lubbock, Texas. Miller, I think, this is an important question for this team because there's going to be so many different elements that are important for this group. But for this Drive of the Game segment, I wanted to ask this question for who is going to be the most important position group on this team.
I believe it's going to be our running backs.
Okay.
I believe our backs are going to be, kind of the engine of the offense. You're not having that elite quarterback as Brendan Sorsby. I know it's unfortunate with the way everything played out, but you can still rock with Will, and for him to kind of rely on that running back room to kind of get his feet underneath him, get settled into these games. I think they're going to be our most important position group.
Yeah, that's a great choice. We were talking about them earlier, how good and important that group is going to be. And I think this group actually ties hand in hand with the running backs. For me, I'm going to go with the offensive line. I think at times last season, you saw them struggle with pre-snap penalties. You saw them struggle with holding penalties. They were a solid group. They ranked in the top 30 in most metrics. But to really take that next step to be a true contender for a national championship and a playoff contender, you have to have an elite offensive line. And I think with the addition of Jordan Church, you have a guy like Hunter Zambrano coming back from an injury He was supposed to be your starting left guard last year. Now you have, in my opinion at least, probably besides Cincinnati or BYU, the best offensive line group in this conference. And I think you have to, especially having Will Hammond back there. You don't have Brendan Sorsey back there anymore. Where Brendan, Will is a very versatile player. He can move with his legs. But at the beginning of the season, I imagine he's probably going to have some reins on him, not running too much, especially against who we play, the first 2 weeks of the season. But Brennan, fully healthy and a guy that you've heard rumors that he, runs in the 4.4, 4.5s. You can kind of take some of that weight off your offensive line. I think early on in the season, the offensive line is going to be paramount for this team's success, especially week 3 against Houston. Might be your biggest game all year. But as we head throughout this season, I think they're just going to keep getting better and better, and hopefully everyone stays healthy. But yeah, you got anything else for any other position groups or?
Also kind of going I guess hand in hand with the offensive line, that tight end group that we're talking about. That's going to be Will's best friend, Terrence Carter. We've talked about it, how Will's kind of bought in and always texting TC to go out, throw balls, kind of work on their craft and everything. I feel like just having that elite level of tight ends in that room is really going to help, be that security blanket for Will early on.
Completely agree. That's a great pick right there. And that kind of wraps up our Texas Tech football talk. And finally, we do have some sort of men's basketball news to discuss. It's been on the news front pretty bare this whole entire summer as we head closer to college basketball season. Obviously, it starts way later than football. Starts early November. But we did have some schedule news, actually some big news today. Texas Tech will face off against Duke once again. Last year, what a game that was. Christian Anderson at the end of the game goes nuclear and carries us to a victory in Madison Square Garden. And then also you add in a couple of non-conference opponents as well. It's being rumored by the same reporter as well that you will also play USC in Fort Worth at Dickies Arena. That should be a great non-conference game as well. I think, having a strong non-conference, you already had in Illinois here in Lubbock. That's going to be an electric atmosphere. Should be a sold-out crowd. One of the best teams in the country with Illinois coming into your building. But as we fill out the rest of this roster, you did see, some reports just yesterday that JaMychal Stillwell, a transfer from UCF, could be getting that extra year, making a decision soon, and it sounds like the Red Raiders lead that pack. But you could also have some fan-beloved players. If they do get another season, you could possibly see them have an opportunity to come back in the Scarlet and Black, and that is guys like Darian Williams and Donovan Atwell. What would it mean, Miller, to have, especially, and I guess not especially, but having both Darian and potentially Donovan Atwell just have the opportunity to even choose to come back to Texas Tech?
Oh, that'd be so huge if they were given that opportunity to come back. You get Atwell back, you get D5 back, you hopefully can land Stillwell. It just was announced, last week, 2 weeks ago, that JT Toppin's coming back. And so, really, I think you're just one big man away from, being a national championship contender.
Yeah, I think this team, if you were able to add, those are 3 all-conference guys that were, playing at a very high level last year. And, Darian, his last year here at Texas Tech, he was almost on All-American list. That's how good he was. So if he was able to come back, we all know how beloved he is here from Texas Tech fans. And then obviously Donovan Atwell last year, one of the best three-point shooters in the country. His is a little more tricky. He is he was currently playing for the Chicago Bulls, their summer league team, and he was playing very well for them, actually. So if Donovan, for some reason, didn't get, an NBA contract, maybe you see him file for that extra year. You're seeing these injunctions all over college sports, and you're seeing it currently right now because of the 5-and-5 rule that was passed, obviously, throughout this sport. But you brought up a big man. this team still does need another big man. You do have young players like Mariel Kutok and Latrell Hoover, but you need a true center on this team. And there are reports out there about a European big. His name is Basala Bagiako, and he comes over. I want to say he played in France, but these European guys are tricky. I'm dealing with them, so we'll see. How that all plays out. That's just kind of rumors out there you're seeing on social media that he could be a possible addition to this team. We'll have to see how that all plays out. Nothing's set in stone at all, but if you were able to fill out this roster, even with 3 of those guys, I think you are looking at a very, very good team because you have a Demarion Dennis, Dre Gibbs Longhorn, JT Taubman, obviously coming back from his ACL, Cruz Davis, one of the top point guards in the whole country, and Josiah Mosley back on this team, Miller. If you could add even 3 of those guys, would this team, in your eyes, be in contention for a national championship?
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily, I think so. You always know, you're going to have that depth, especially when you want to go on those deep runs later in March. And so just bringing, even 2 of these guys back can really just, strengthen our team and allow us to make that next step and going all the way.
Yeah, because, I think really right now everyone, what they're worried about is, JT coming back from that injury. He's not going to be there till probably January. So definitely need some more pieces to help out this team in that tough non-conference schedule that we just talked about. But that'll kind of wrap up our Texas Tech men's basketball talk. And I think as we, move on, we were talking about our predictions for Texas Tech. We had a post or a couple posts, go pretty viral based off of our opinions of what we think could happen this season in college football. This is more on a national scale. The biggest trophies, biggest conferences and stuff. First off, we'll talk about the Heisman. We had some interesting discussions in the comments of our posts. Potentially some hot takes maybe from some of the Guns Blazin a crew on that post. First off, me and Will, who's behind the camera, we did have Trinidad winning the Heisman. Obviously, Jordan went with Jeremiah Smith. Jet, he went with Will Hammond. He went for it. Picked Will Hammond. Obviously,
true homer.
Yeah, a true homer pick there for Texas Tech. Miller, you went with Dante Moore. Logan with Darian Mensah, and then Zach behind the camera as well went with Bo Jackson, who he did have a tremendous freshman year for Ohio State, averaging over 6 yards per carry with over 1,000 yards. But that would be, you'd win a lot of money if you picked Bo Jackson and won the Heisman Trophy. But what's kind of some of your thoughts on some of the feedback we were getting from our picks and I guess just on the list overall, Miller?
Well, besides Zach's Bo Jackson pick, which I think is a long shot. A lot would have to go in his way, but there's a lot of hate for Will Hammond. I get it. He's not like Brendan Swordsbury. You bring him in thinking he has a real shot at the Heisman. Can't play. You go to Will. I think he has a good shot, especially with all the pieces around him. He's definitely a sleeper pick. Not a top dog favorite, but if everything goes right, if he can stay healthy, and we have, like you said, such an elite running back room, such an elite tight end room, a very deep wide receiver room, why not?
Yeah. And if he does end up being a top 3 quarterback in this conference and he's sitting on a team that is 12-0, if he wins, the Big 12 championship, or Texas Tech, I should say, wins the Big 12 championship, that is before the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So you never know. I would imagine, they're obviously probably going to be more biased to the SEC and Big Ten, kind of a lot of the voters are. But, if Will had a season that we thought maybe Brendan Swordsbury was supposed to have, and they're sitting at 13-0 there at the beginning of December, I think Will could maybe find himself in that conversation. Obviously, a very long shot, but, maybe we're just homers here sitting up here talking about it. But I did pick Trinidad Chambliss. I think he is the best quarterback coming back into college football. I think you could obviously have an argument with him and Dante Moore, but I think if they both would have won the draft, Dante would have probably been picked higher. But in my opinion, I think, if you turn on the tape from last year, Trinidad, besides Fernando Mendoza, I think you could make a true argument that he was the second best quarterback in all of college football last season. And he returns to a team with a lot of weapons. Obviously, they do lose Lane Kiffin. A lot of guys, did go to LSU and followed Lane, but you have Kawan Lacey back on that in that offense and a bunch of receivers that are really talented, and he keeps the same offensive coordinator. It seems like they kind of wanted to keep that group together for one last run, and honestly, kind of a revenge run to play against Lane Kiffin because they do get them in Oxford this year. But yeah, it's I think this year is going to be interesting in the Heisman Trophy race, Miller.
Yeah, there's so many options. Obviously,
Yeah, here's a little
Yeah, I do like the Logan's Darian Mensah pick.
Yeah.
I think that he can have a sneaky good year in the ACC, and also, Miami goes out, wins the ACC undefeated. He leads them. He led Duke to the ACC title last year, and so I think he just really can have a good shot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Miami's going to be a very good team this year. They are my favorites to win the ACC as we head into our conference championship picks, and this is where we saw definitely some interesting picks here. I went with in the Big 12 Texas Tech, and the SEC I did go with the University of Texas. In the Big 10 I went with Ohio State, ACC Miami. Zach went with Texas Tech. He went with Tennessee, USC, and Louisville. Definitely some dark horse picks there. Let's see. Logan went with Texas Tech, Georgia. He went with, Indiana and Miami on his list. I think that's all great picks there. I think, a lot of people went with Georgia because, Texas still hasn't been able to beat them and climb that mountaintop. So another pick there with them. And then Will had Tech, LSU, Ohio State, and Miami. Jordan, we clean sweep the Big 12 with Texas Tech. I think we can, I think it's pretty much a given. Yeah. SEC, Jordan went with Alabama, Ohio State, and Virginia Tech. James Franklin's first year up there at Virginia Tech. Jordan went with VTech there. Jet in the SEC, he had LSU as well. He had Oregon in the Big Ten, first side of Oregon, and then Miami in the ACC. And then Miller, you had Georgia, Ohio State, and Miami to finish off all of our conference championship predictions. As we head back to, we'll start with mine first. I went with Texas in the SEC just because I think if they don't do it this year with this team, I don't know if they're going to have a more talented team. This is the most talented team in college football roster-wise, at least in my opinion. They have a $50 million roster. You have Arch Manning. You have Cam Coleman coming to a wide receiver room that already had Ryan Wingo. You return Trevor Gooseby, maybe the best tackle in all of college football. Add more pieces into that offensive line. You can just go down the list on this team, how talented they are, but they have always had their issues in the big games, right? Mm-hmm. I think that if this is the year they potentially do that, especially if they start their season off with a win versus Ohio State, kind of get that momentum since the game is in Austin this year. I think you will see that for this Texas team. Not the most confident in that pick, but I think with how talented they are, it's just hard not to pick them. But I think them and Georgia are neck and neck there, Miller.
Yeah, Texas definitely has the pieces, and I thought about them for it. I mean, obviously, I'm going to biased against them, being a Red Raider. But the reason I went with Georgia is just because, like you said, Texas is unproven in those big games. They, have always been able, almost like in England and sorts, always been competitive, but just can never get to the finish line. So I think, Georgia is probably my favorite to win that conference just because, they are proven. They have Kirby Smart, you're returning Gunnar Stockton. They're proven.
Yeah,
unlike Texas.
They are. Georgia is under Kirby Smart, they're always going to be in contention, and they do return Gunnar Stockton, just like Miller said, and A ton of great pieces on their defense and as well. So yeah, a lot of great picks in here. Obviously we did have Zach. He went with some dark horses here, man, with Tennessee, USC, and Louisville. Of those three, though, Miller, I wanted to ask you which, I guess, dark horse pick do you see, I guess, being the most likely of the three?
It would have to be Louisville for me.
Yeah.
I think, Tennessee would be a crazy shout. It's such a competitive SEC,
Yeah.
and same with USC in the Big Ten. Definitely dark horse. But I think Louisville is probably my favorite dark horse pick from Zach. I'm pretty sure they've got the second or third best odds already anyway to win the ACC, and if all goes well.
Yeah, and Louisville, they add in a ton of talent too. Leakin Kindholz comes in. He was supposed to take over at quarterback for Nebraska, but transfers over to Louisville. They retain Isaac Brown out of the portal. It was reported he was probably going to go to Texas actually instead of Hollywood Smothers, who they ended up stealing from Alabama, talking about Texas. Isaac Brown, he stays at Louisville, one of the best running backs in the whole entire country, and they bring in a ton of great talent just on the rest of this roster. They had one of the top transfer portal classes in the country. I want to say they were actually in the top 5 as well. That's a really talented team, and they have a very manageable schedule. And man, if they somehow were able to beat Ole Miss in that, or I think it's week 1 or 2, I want to say,
Week 2, I believe.
Yeah, week 2, they could definitely go 12-0 on their schedule. They do not have a very tough schedule at all. I think their really toughest game left would be like at Georgia Tech. But man, I think Louisville, that could be a really talented team there. But so Zach, I think you might have a sneaky pick there maybe with Louisville right there. But as we head on to our most underrated teams, we got them kind of all over the place here, so we can quickly go through them. Mine was Oklahoma State in the Big 12. I had Auburn in the SEC and Alex Golish's first year, bringing in Byron Brown at the quarterback room. I think they have a more manageable schedule than they have in years past. In the Big 10, I have UCLA bringing in from Bob Chesney from James Madison. You saw them they were in the college football playoff last year. They went up to Oregon, and that first half was a little rough for them, but they actually ended up kind of making that game competitive at the end. I think Nico Iamaleava actually last year had a pretty underrated season. Not a lot of people talked about it. Pretty good season from him last year. He returns, and they add in a ton of pieces from different teams in the transfer portal and James Madison, their best players. I think UCLA could be a sneaky team in that conference. And then Cal, I'm not even going to try to attempt to say his name, but they returned Jaron Koya, whatever his Sagapolotele, I think. He's at quarterback there, one of the best quarterbacks in the whole country. They keep him there. Josh Lupoy, it's going to be his first year as head coach there. They have some interesting pieces. I think it's going to be figuring out their offensive line really on this team. But those are my picks for most underrated teams. Miller, I think you can go ahead and kind of take it away with your picks as well.
Yeah, so for my picks, I had Kansas State for the Big 12. I really think their schedule favors them. They have the second easiest strength of schedule in the Big 12. And you're getting Colin Klein, bringing him in. He really helped out Mike Elko and the Aggies on their offensive play calling. Moving on to the SEC, I picked Florida. John Summerall's first year. See what he can do down there. Penn State for the Big Ten. I mean, you're bringing in I'm blanking on his name from
Matt Campbell.
Yeah. Rocco Beck, kind of overhauling that offense after James Franklin's time there. And then for the ACC, I picked Virginia. So
yeah, I think those are great picks. I was actually for the SEC. It was either going to be Auburn or Florida for me. I liked that you and Logan picked Florida. I think John Summerall is a great coach. He's hard-nosed. He's kind of what Florida has needed. They haven't had really a tough-nosed head coach, I'd probably honestly say, since Urban Meyer. I mean, it's been – I mean, Dan Mullen had a little, whatever there, and Jim McElwain did have a 10-win season or whatever. But John Summerall, I think, he brings in a lot of talent, and they retained almost like 80% of their snaps from last year, including Jaden Baugh, maybe the best returning running back in the whole entire country, just overall wise. So Florida is a really sneaky team there. I like that pick. As far as underrated goes, we didn't really have too many, outlandish picks. I think pretty much across the board they were pretty straightforward.
Pretty solid,
Nothing too hot take on this pick right here for most underrated. But we'll continue this segment as we head throughout the off season. We'll have some more picks for you guys, not just here but on our social media platforms. But that'll kind of move us on from that segment and lead us into our injury report segment. Fans, it's time for this week's injury report presented by the Exceptional Community Hospital. And before we hop into this week's injury report, we just want to take a moment and recognize the Exceptional Community Hospital as a proud sponsor of Campus Live and the Guns Blazin podcast. And be sure to visit their 24/7 state-of-the-art hospital and ER located at 6401 Spur 327 in Lubbock. They accept all insurances and have short ER wait times. And once again, the Exceptional Community Hospital is proud to support this week's injury report on the Guns Blazin podcast. We talked about it earlier this week. Will Hammond, and today it was actually officially announced him as QB1 for Texas Tech, and Joey McGuire at the Texas High School Coaches Association press conference announced that he is going to be ready for week 1, which is big news. I think, really that's kind of the only injury reports that we kind of have to update you guys with, but huge news obviously about Will Hammond Miller.
Great news. I'm glad that he was going to be able to play, those first 2 games. I was kind of nervous just to throw him right back into Houston week 3 matchup. But since he will be able to, get some reps in early on for those games and, 2 games that we should win by halftime, so he doesn't have to go out there and play the entire game and be at risk for messing up his knee anymore.
Yeah, completely agree there. And as we move on from our injury report segment, once again, fans, make sure to check out the Exceptional Community Hospital if you have any sort of needs for that. But as we move on, we talked about this on Wednesday. The Texas Tech schedule for week 1 and 2, we're gonna break this down as we move. We're about 6 weeks away from opening kickoff. And it's our Paving the Way to Victory segment. Fans, JSI Services is a proud partner of Campus Live, and be sure to visit their website at jsiservicesllc.com to learn about their asphalt/paving services, earth and dirt works, concrete and gutter paving, crack fill, seal coating, and stripping services. And thank you so much to JSI Services for their proud support of Campus Live and the Guns Blazin podcast. We will give our Paving the Way to Victory here in a second after we talk about the schedule. Obviously, starting with ACU week number 1. On Wednesday, we kind of broke them down. They are projected to win their conference, the UAC and the FCS level of college football. And they return, a good amount of guys. I think, honestly, the most interesting piece about this team is they return a trio along their offensive line with the Roten brothers and Coulter Lynch that had behind them an ACU offense that had 3 different 500-yard rushers from last year. Obviously, they will have some different rushers back there, but, this is a very talented offensive line, and I think that's probably what you're going to see Shieldwood and this defense focus on in this game, is focusing on defending their run game and stopping a talented offensive line at ACU. And then, they have some interesting, portal additions here. You recognize some names. We talked about it, like I said, on Wednesday, but Chris Brazell, his younger brother, Colin Brazell, a corner from Tennessee, Mackenzie McGill from North Texas. You go down the list, Miller. But probably a more talented FCS team than most teams will play against in this non-conference, Miller.
Yeah, they definitely had one of the better, off-season transfer portals, bringing in guys like Wes Tucker, to strengthen that offensive line. Got him from Baylor. I really think this is going to be a good, first game, kind of wake-up call for our defense, see how they can handle it all. And then, talking back about Will Hammond, getting him in there, getting reps going, and then hopefully, bring Kirk Francis in to kind of lead that offense the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think, this Abilene Christian team, obviously this is a game you should 100% at halftime. You're up by 4 or 5 touchdowns, hopefully. But we all have PTSD. We talked about it
a couple years ago.
from a couple years ago. But yeah, that's a game you should absolutely be winning. 50 to 14. So, guess your score, and that should be how you win these type of games. But as we move on from ACU, you will have a tougher, I guess, more tough team in week 2. You are traveling to Corvallis at Oregon State. I'm sure that atmosphere in their newer stadium, is going to be rocking. They do have a new coach with Jamarcus Shepard. They return Malik Murphy at quarterback. And they add in a pretty talented receiving core with Texas transfer Aaron Butler, Alabama transfer Aaron Hampton, and UT Rio Grande Valley transfer Xavier Nolan. It's really in the trenches, though. They can have all the weapons that, on the outside as they want. If the offensive line can't stop our front seven, it's going to be a really long day for them up in Corvallis. But I think you will see a more improved team from Oregon State this year. But you should definitely still win this game, 52 to 17 or something.
Yeah, I know. We played them last year. We won, I believe it was 35-14. Their scores came in late, garbage time, and we just they've gotten better, but I'd argue we've gotten better too.
Right.
I do like that we're going to play them away. I think that's going to be such a rowdy environment. You're having potentially one of their biggest home games of the season in week 2, so it'll be a good test for our guys, to go into such a hostile environment.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in those games, are paving the way to victory in those games, staying healthy. We talked about it on Wednesday. You stay healthy, play great defense, have, a functional and I guess coordinated offensive effort, with the running backs, Will recovering from that injury, you want him to just stay healthy, don't have to do too much. Just stay healthy and win both of those games by 5 touchdowns, Miller.
Yeah, he just needs to. He doesn't need to be the hero in these 2 games.
Yeah.
He needs to play smart, be a hero later on in the season. But if Will can stay healthy, we start, seeing how our new look offense with the 3 backs for the season is going to look. I think we should take care of business.
100%. And Willie will continue to cover our schedule, obviously on our Countdown to Kickoff series, but also here on the Guns Blazin podcast as we move closer and closer to football season. But lastly, huge news in sports today. The GOAT, LeBron James, chose the Philadelphia 76ers for, it sounds like 2 seasons. You see in a tweet that he put out that he was going to retire after the Lakers' last game this past season, but he did choose to go to the Philadelphia 76ers, and this starting 5, one of the most stacked starting 5s you'll ever see. If they can stay healthy, I think Joel Embiid is the big if here. All the rest of the 4 guys, those are guys that they stay healthy quite a bit. They, Edgecombe, Maxey, and Jaylen Brown all played over 70 games last year. You gotta, that's really the core of this team with LeBron. LeBron, even though he's in his 40s, he's still going to give you 60 to 65 games in the regular season every year. Joel Embiid, I think, is the key to this team, hitting obviously their ceiling. But man, this starting 5, if they're healthy, Miller, this is crazy.
This has to be the best starting 5.
Yeah.
Right now, we were talking about his deal and everything. 2 years, $8 million, took a massive pay cut, just because he wanted to go somewhere where he could, go compete and go win a ring. That's kind of where his decision lied. He believed in this, what they are building in Philadelphia. He believes in this elite starting group, and it'll be a fun season. The East is really spicing it up.
Yeah, the East is it's pretty crazy. You see Giannis go to the Heat, and we thought the Sixers might have been done. With adding Jaylen Brown. But now they also add LeBron James. And I think, kind of an underrated signing they had too was Anthony Simons. He's going to be basically their 6th man.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, that's a guy that, up in Portland just a couple of years ago was averaging over 20 points a game. So this is a very talented team. Should be great to see them in the Eastern Conference. But that'll kind of wrap things up here in the Campus Live studios today. And thank you, fans, so much for tuning in once again. And make sure you follow, like, share, and subscribe wherever you see our content on Campus Live or the Guns Blazin podcast, as well as thanking all of our sponsors once again for their continued support of Campus Live and the Guns Blazin podcast. And lastly, remember that Campus Live is your one-stop news source for all things Texas Tech and Lubbock.
Wreck 'em.